Hey, welcome back. In this video I'm going to do something entirely different. I'm in a flying club. The airplane went in for an annual, had a overhauled engine installed. But the plastic in the interior was the original 1976 plastic, and this stuff just disintegrated in our hands. So I took on the task of getting the new parts, which the club paid for, and then painting them, prepping them, doing all the stenciling so they could go in the airplane. Something the owner can do. I'm really not an owner, I'm just a club member. I own 1/10 of it, so I own a little bit, probably the tail or something. But since this was shot, I've left the club and I'm flying out of a different airport now, renting. So anyway, I've got a lot of experience working with fiberglass when I was building wooden boats. So I'm applying those skills to this video, but I'm learning a new skill, and as I say in the video, I'm making molds. Now, a little change. I was going to make the mold out of the first piece that came off the male mold, and that would be a mold to make more of these things. But along the way, I looked at the market, and nobody cares about these, really, these little light holders. So I just used the original piece that popped off the male mold, and that became the part that went into the airplane. So without further ado, let's do some fiberglass work and make an airplane part. And now for something completely different. So this is the center console cover for a 1976 Cessna 182P for a 4-seat airplane. I'm in a flying club. I do not own an airplane. Doing some work on the airplane, we discovered that the old parts were really fragile and they started falling apart. So we bought new ones. I painted them, I stenciled them, and all that. So it's going in the airplane eventually. But there's supposed to be a light right here that shines down on a fuel selector valve right there. Well, the old one had that light, and it had the cone to hold the light, and that cone was back here, and that's unobtainium. I think Cessna only offered that thing on like 1 or 2 years back in the 70s. The little plastic cone that goes here, you snap your light in there, there's a little window here, boom, you've got light on the fuel selector at night. So, there is woodworking involved in putting this part on. I have to make the part. So I'm learning a new skill, laying out fiberglass over a mold. So I'm going to make the cone, which is one of the very few things the owner, operator of an airplane can do. Fasten it to the back, and then we'll be able to put the light bulb in there, and I'll cut for the window. I still have the window. So we're going to start out with this hunk of maple. This is actually a glue up of four pieces of maple, cut to size, and then hex, so I can chuck it up on the lathe and spin it down. I'm going to make the form for, actually no, I'm making the mold for that part out of this maple. And then once I've got the mold made and I'm satisfied with it, I'll go ahead and lay up the part on top of that, pop the part off, fit it, cut it, and fit it to the back here so we can put that light in. Learning a new skill, molding parts from fiberglass, something I've never done. So let's get started. So I got the chunk of maple of the 4 glue ups, 4 pieces of wood, cut to dimension and then hexed for easier roughing. There's another video on my channel here about how easy it is to do that without doing any measurements. So now I've got it marked, I got to punch the dimples in it and chuck it up in the lathe, and we'll start turning. So, I know you didn't see any of that because my back was to the camera. I threw some stuff in there. This is the conical shape that I need. Let's unchuck that. So this is the conical shape that I need. I've sanded this to almost a glass finish. I'll nub it off and then sand and prepare the top and the bottom. This will get fastened to a piece of plywood, something. And everything will be sealed with epoxy, clear epoxy, sanded smooth, clear epoxy, sanded smooth. That'll become the base for the mold. When that's cured, sanded, polished, and smooth, the next step is to lay up the fiberglass over this that's going to become the mold for the finished part. Then once I pop that mold off, if I can pop that mold off, pop the part off the mold, then we'll drill the hole for the light switch, trim it to fit inside the console, epoxy that in place, and it'll be done. So here it is, cut off and sanded and pretty much polished. And the finished part is actually going to sit right here. Kind of hard to see in the camera there. It's going to sit right there. So what I'm going to do now is turn this into a mold. And like I said, you fasten it down to a surface and you coat it with epoxy. Several layers of epoxy, make it nice and smooth and glassy. Then you put release agent. Well, release agent is nothing more than paste wax, some kind of paste wax. 7 or 8 coats of paste wax. Then you put the matte cloth and epoxy on top of this, which creates your mold. Once that's cured, you pop it off, and then you have a mold to make multiples of these. So when I finish this and take the part up to our mechanic at the airport and hand him the part all glued up and ready to go, he says, oh, by the way, if you need any more, I've got the mold. So next step is to turn that into a real fiberglass mold. So the cone is done. This is going to be the form for the mold. The mold I can make parts from. The mold will be made of fiberglass, bidirectional fiberglass. Matte, the multi-directional matte. This has been sanded very, very smooth, down to 220. Radius to top, because fiberglass does not like corners, it likes radiuses. Now I have to create a radius here at the bottom. I'm going to do that with a fillet. And the fillet is real simple. I'm going to mix some epoxy with wood flour. Wood flour. For those who aren't aware, there's such a thing as called wood flour. It's just finely ground sawdust. It's almost to the level of fuller's earth, and all it is a thickening agent. So you can run epoxy into joints that need to have a fillet, and then you'd glass over that. In this case, I'm just going to create the fillet, and then sand all that smooth, and then coat the entire thing with several coats of clear epoxy, and polish that smooth, and that becomes the form to make the mold. So the epoxy is, I have nothing to do with this company, it's MAS. I get it from a local boat shop, Chesapeake Light Craft. I'll give them a shout out. Chesapeake Light Craft in Annapolis, Maryland. Link in down in the description. They have some really, really wonderful kayak, sailboat, and rowboat kits if you are interested in building a kit boat. And they use MAS epoxies. So this stuff is real easy to use. It's 1 squirt each of the resin and the hardener, and that's the correct proportions. That's the mix. And I only need a little bit for what I'm doing. So I mix this up. There we go. Doesn't take long. And then the wood flour. Literally. Wood flour. Don't eat it. Actually, it goes in bread. Don't tell anybody. There it is. That's the consistency of peanut butter. So basically, I gotta spread it around here, kind of messy. All the way around. And then we clean it up. Okay, there we go. So, first things first is run the tool around the cone, clean off that excess. This will get sanded down too before I go ahead and put on the coats of clear epoxy to make it smooth. And you seal up the wood with clear epoxy, so then you can put the release agent on it for the mold you're going to make, and it'll release from the form much easier. I mean, actually, it'll just release. You try to make a form without some kind of release agent. What you have is a piece of wood with fiberglass on it. Double check my fillets here. Outside of the area of the cone doesn't matter, because that's not part of the form. Notice the Celtic music in the background? Yeah, I like Celtic music. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Take a little draw here, and a little bit of a draw here. I mean, the popsicle sticks are the perfect radius for this. There. So that's it. Take a look. I've got the fillet all the way around. That'll get sanded smooth. And then once this is cured and sanded smooth, then I will do several coats of clear epoxy. So this is now ready as a mold. I have coated it with 3 coats of epoxy, which is cured. It's nice and smooth. The base isn't that smooth, so I'll put down a layer of this clear packing tape. This packing tape, epoxy doesn't stick to it very well, so that and in conjunction with the paste wax should keep it off the base. So I coated the whole thing with about 3 coats of paste wax as a release agent. Right here I've got a piece of a shopping bag, which is polypropylene, glued down, taped down here. The best way to do a fiberglass mold like this, or a fiberglass layup like this, is to put the fiberglass on something like this, saturate with your epoxy, take it off, and then wrap it onto your part. It's difficult to take dry fiberglass, put it on here, and then try to epoxy it in place. So with that said, let me mix my epoxy and we'll get started. So now, first piece. And I've pre-cut most of my strands here, and there's going to be a couple of epoxy mixes, I'm sure, to get this in place correctly. Disposable brushes are your friend when working with epoxy. Okay. Okay, there it is, covered. We wait for that to cure, pop it off the mold, and then, or maybe leave it on the mold for a while and put a couple more layers on top of there when it's a little easier after it's cured. This layer is cured. And after that, then it's just shaping it to fit it in the center console cover for the 182. So let's wait for that to happen and we'll follow up later. Okay, it's done now. I didn't shoot part of the video when I was putting this little cone on the back. It was kind of tedious, but I got it done. So let me explain what's going on. So I had to cut and remount a little window in here for the light. Now in the back, so this is the fiberglass cone I made. I cut it, I trimmed it to fit. I glued it in with JB Weld to hold it in place, so then I could come back and I could glass it in with some glass tape. I don't know if you can see it in the video there, but you see this glass tape all the way around and a 5/8 inch hole to hold the light fixture. So this is ready to go back into the airplane. So why don't we go up to the hangar and take a look at the plane and where this goes. So here's the 182 that console goes in. It's now getting an annual done, and along with the overhauled engine and a brand new prop. The new prop's not here yet. I'll show you in a second where the console sits. Looky, brand new, not brand new, but overhauled 0470, zero-timed engine. This is the cleanest it's ever going to be. And as soon as we start it up, you know, and start blowing air across it, it's going to start getting dirty again. This is what an overhauled engine looks like. Looks like a brand new engine, but it's not. So here's where it's going to live. The interior is torn out because of the annual inspection going on, but that's the console. Let me get in there and show you exactly where it goes. So here's the center console part of the airplane. That has trim controls, it has a fuel selector valve, and it also has the cowl flaps, which is how you change the airflow through the engine compartment. And what's going to happen is this mounts right up here. Yeah, in there somewhere. I mean, I got to get it around stuff. I'm just going to show you where it goes. There. And this is the light down here that I made that cone for. Right there. So that's how it's all going to work. And then the other one that came off of here literally just disintegrated in our hands when we took it out. So that's it. Project finished. Back to woodworking. Okay, so I'm back in the airplane. It's out of the hangar and out of the ramp. It's already flown once. But here's the center console installed and in place with all its stuff. And if I do say so myself, it doesn't look very bad at all. Anyhow, that's the center console. Here's the panel, all our avionics. It's blowing like hell out here right now. And anyway, so I'm giving this up, going to a different club, so I won't have a 182 anymore. I'll be able to fly one. But that's the install. So these pieces of plastic here surrounding the windows, you see, that's a couple of pieces that I had to put in as well. There's also one up above the rear window. That piece right there, and these two pieces to go along here. Had to paint, trim to fit, and then paint and put it in place. So that was that. I didn't put that in the other video. That was just a cookie job. All right, until later.